Yes, nice. Are we live? Let's go. So, hello everyone. I will do some small technical part of the presentation before we start the actual presentation. So, the presentation is hosted by group DevOps. And hello to you in the live streaming. So, I will talk about the group itself. So, we have some social media out there, so if you do not want to register yourself into meetup.com, so there is some free links where you can see about us. We are mainly active in Twitter, and we do post time to time in Instagram. It's not our favorite stuff, but Twitter is where we post all the time. Meetup.com and Twitter is where we post it all the time. All right? And you don't necessarily have to register, so we don't really ask you to register. Just if you are interested to see what we are hosting and etc., just look at them. It's just publicly open. We don't close anything. It's 100% open. If you do not like any social media, go to just github.com. It's completely open. So everything what we do there is 100% open. So you can see the upcoming events and etc. Another cool thing is if you think you have a cool company, so think about Foo Café and try to sponsor Foo Café because they are doing amazing job to host us. So big applause to Foo Café. And one other thing that will add to your company to be cool is if you want to speak in our meetup group. So think about that, okay? So we help you to craft your presentation if you need. We can also help you to do some presentation beforehand and etc. So if you have any ideas to talk and people on live as well, I know one person is watching. So yeah, think about that. If you have some good ideas and etc., just come on and let's have share the knowledge what we have. Good. So our next meetup we have planned on January 20 another meetup, and it's gonna be introduce rule-based refactoring. So you can check this out, and there is more information in meetup.com, or it is going to be posted, or it's already posted in foocafe.org. All right. And let's start with one of the cool companies and cool guy who is going to present, and it's going to be about a simple explanation of how email verification works. And I added a simple explanation explicitly because I know it's not going to be simple, but I 100% trust Simon. So let's welcome Simon to present. I can set my view. Thank you. And just one more technical info, people for online, we are going to watch YouTube live stream, and if you have question, you can just post in chat. So I'm gonna watch it. Good. Yeah, she's gonna watch as well. Yes. Let's have high redundancy. So if I don't watch.
Whatever. Of course, nothing works now. I'm just gonna redo this. Nej. Det är fint. works. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. Like so. Okay, it works. So I'm gonna talk about how mail got some trust issues. Mail was designed like a lot of years ago, and it was designed during a time where you trusted everyone, and you could, and mail was just used in a small community, and we have kept it like that since then. And as you can see in this presentation, this is a dumpster fire with all the RFCs used in mail. So in the normal setup, you can spoof mails from anyone, and you can send mails to anyone, and there is no verification that the sender is correct, and this causes some problems. Mail is split into two main RFCs. One is called SMTP, and one is the actual mail message format. Let's see. I have a hard time seeing both screens. And both of them allow you to specify a from address and a to address. This causes some problems because you can then have one sender address, one delivery address, and then in the mail body you have a different email address. This allows you to spoof an email, and no one can actually see how that happened. This is important to know that there are two different from headers because in the later protocols we will see how those affect the SPF and DKIM and so on. So let's send an email and show how that's done. First, we ask for the MX record for a domain we want to send to. In this case, we want to send to devesen.se, and we want to send from my spam.xil domain. We ask for the MX record, and we get some MX records back. We then connect to the receiving mail server on port 25. In this case, it's Google, as you can see, Gmail. We connect, and Google directly says, "Hey, you're connected," and then we can send her hello. Hello is extended hello, so they have done some small differences in that one. It then sends us a list of things we can do with it, and then we send our mail from. In this case, we send from spam@xil.se. We have, and this is called return path or envelope from, or it got some different names that's not really used. And it says, okay, all fine. And then we say that we want to send to some receiver. This is where the mail will end up. This is where the mail server will actually deliver the mail. You might have received mails where the to address is, for example, the sender only or empty, but it ended up in your email inbox anyway, and this is due to this. It says okay, and then we send the actual mail. So all this stuff up here, that's been the SMTP protocol. And now we continue to the actual body. So now we have the body. As you can see here, we have a new from address. This can differ from the previous from address. And this can be whatever. The problem with mail is that the stuff you see in the actual email doesn't have to match reality in any way. That's just, you can compare it to Yeah, you can compare it to an actual physical letter where you have an address on the letter, and then you have some content that may or may not match whatever you expect it to say. So in the body we have the from, we have the to, we have a subject, we have some actual mail body, and then we end with a dot. This is important to remember, that we have two different froms, and it is because that will affect alignments. So let's talk about SPF. SPF was the first protocol we got. We have had it for a long time. It's a way to authenticate the sender of an email. It uses the return path or envelope from, that is the first from address we had in the SMTP protocol. So it will verify that mail sent was sent using the correct envelope, but it will not verify that the from header in the actual mail was correct. So this might pass, but the content will still be wrong, or it might be spoofed, or you get spam or whatever. As SPF record, it contains a list of IP numbers, or includes or other rules that tells the receiving server where it should allow stuff from. And it can cause problems with mail forwards, old mail forwards, where you just take the mail and then you deliver it to somewhere else without changing the actual content. So it uses TXT records in DNS. There are a bunch of other records in DNS, but for mail, we usually only use MX, A, and TXT records. It needs to be published for each subdomain. So if you send from example.com, then you need one for example.com. If you send one from a subdomain of example.com, then you need one for that too. Usually you add, like, for example, a wildcard, but that can cause other problems with empty non-terminals, but ignore that for now. Yeah, sure.
So we have online question, and someone asked, I have some issue knowing the context of this. Is this how a client communicate with a mail server, or this is something you do in command line?
No, this is how. This is actually how a mail client talks to a mail server, or a mail server talks to a mail server. You use the same protocol for both of them, SMTP. They just talk the same protocol. You usually use port 25, but most ISP block that, so you probably have some other port you use currently.
I think question is regarding like how you can get this data.
Yes, I will show that later. So,
yep.
So usually you don't have to care about the mail protocol as such. It's just important to know that there is two different from addresses. One is the envelope from, and one is in the mail body, and that's really important for alignments later on. So let's look at a real SPF record. This is where you as a user can add records. So let's say that you're sending mails, in this case from one.com, where I work. If you send a mail from one.com, with the envelope from one.com, the receiving mail server will look up this record, ask for a TXT record for one.com, and it will get this back. This tells the server to include this domain, and it should soft fail on all. This means that it won't hard reject. It will base its spam filter based on the rules or on its own ideas instead of just blocking it. And this is a good idea to keep, but we can come back to that later on. And then the sending mail server, it asks for _spf.one.com, and it gets a list of IP numbers. This is the different IP numbers that are allowed to send email for this domain. Usually, when you configure this yourself for your domain, and you use, for example, Microsoft, or you use SendGrid or whatever, then you usually get a specific include to add. So you get, for example, spf.sendgrid.com or something similar. So it's not that hard to configure itself. The problem is to know which IP numbers you actually send from. And SPF, as it is currently, you have no idea if you did it correctly. But there is some new stuff for that I will talk about. This is the rules you can have in SPF, as you saw previously. All, that is for the rest, like if you want to pass all or deny all. If you want to deny all, then you can add a minus or a tilde in front. Include, that will just include a different subdomain. A, which is kind of confusing, that will be the A record for the domain if you connect to the mail server over IPv4. If you connect over IPv6, that will be the quad A record. MX is the sending domain, IPv4 is the IP4 is the IPv4 address, IP6 is the obviously IP6 address, and exists is the same as include, but it just checks if it works. SPF allows you to do some macros, but I'm not going to talk about that because it's messy. Right, so for SPF alignment, we have something we call alignment, and that is when a mail server checks that the return path or the from address matches the mail body's mail address. And it's allowed to have a subdomain in this case. So if I send envelope from for example, newsletter.example.com, and the mail body says example.com, then alignment will pass if you're relaxed, but let's ignore that. And this is very confusing when you set up DMARC later on. And this is really hard to explain, and there are a lot of guides, and yeah, it's messy. Anyway, let's talk about DKIM. So SPF, it got some issues. You just verified one of the from addresses. You don't care about the actual mail body, so you can just spoof it no matter what. So they come up with this DKIM thing, where you publish a public key for you generate a private and a public key, and then you sign the mail. This is done by the mail servers. You can actually not do it yourself as easy. And then you publish the public key in DNS, and the mail server will verify that. And this one is using the from in the header in the body. So this one is not actually using the envelope from. This is using the body. So it's the opposite of SPF in this case. In the mail, you have an identifier. I will show you how mail looks. And then under domain keys, under domain, you publish the public key. So let's look at an actual mail. So we're going to use Boozt.com, where Karen works. They actually made everything correct. Yes. So if we open this, we can see a lot of things. Google is nice to us. It says that SPF passed. This IP sent it, and it's in the list of allowed IP numbers. DKIM passed. So they managed to sign it properly and publish the key properly. And the DMARC passed. I will show that later on. So how does this look in an actual mail? This is the mail body that I talked about. It just contains a lot of more things. In this case, we have the mail body. It's down here. We have the subject, and we have the to address, and we have the from address. In this case, they send from email.boozt.com. That is all correct. And then they have the DKIM signature. This is the important stuff here. So here they say that it's using it uses RSA and SHA 256 for hashing. It's using this subdomain. This will be that subdomain on top of that with underscore domain keys in between. And this is to verify the content of the mail. This is kind of good because that allows you to forward a mail and still prove the content. This is something that the mail server does for you. Usually, when you send a mail, for example from SendGrid, they will tell you to create a record under your domain, and then they will publish the public key, or they will tell you to publish a public key that they give to you, a TXT record. But you hopefully mostly a CNAME. I don't know what they do here. I haven't verified it. So this is done completely correctly, and they have managed to fix it. We can also see here that I think that no, they actually use the same. That's boring. But anyway, so the D here could be some subdomain here. This could be, for example, newsletter.email.boozt.com, and it would still pass because email.boozt.com is in the email address. So it can just be a subdomain of it. But this is what the mail server does. You don't actually have to care how this works. Usually just accept it. But you might be asked to add it to your record. Let's see. Yeah?
When you say the mail server does it for you.
Yes.
Mail server
In this case, it's not Boozt's server. It's, I don't know what you're using there. Yeah, so they're using SendGrid. So in this case, SendGrid does it, and Microsoft does it, and so on. And you need to publish public keys for each and every of those senders. But you can have different identifiers. So you can usually have the date, but you can have whatever. So you can publish multiple of them. Yeah, did you have? Okay, so alignment again. This is where the D part in the mail, let's open that again. The D part, let's see if I can find that. The D part here, that needs to match the from address, in this case here. If it doesn't, then you get alignment issues. Google will still say that DKIM passed if it's a different subdomain. I will show an example of that later on. But when you come to DMARC, it will fail. And that's very, very confusing for people that try to set this up the first time. Let's see again here. Okay, so let's talk about DMARC. So the two first we have talked about here, SPF and DKIM, they don't really tell the mail server what to do if they receive a mail that fail. Usually they base spam score on this. So if SPF failed or DKIM failed, you get a higher spam score and the mail might not get delivered. But you as a user can't control what the server will do. So they made this DMARC thing. I think it was Yahoo that pushed for it. It allows you to publish rules also in DNS using TCP records under _DMARC.sendingdomain.tld. It allows you to specify an email address where you want to receive reports. So now we can add rules and we can get reports back. This is really, really useful if you want to add this. So, and it covers the whole sending domain, so you don't need to have it for each and every subdomain. Let's look at one. So this is a DMARC example. You have a string v equals DMARC1. You have a rule. Usually, when you implement DMARC, you set this to none. You tell the mail server to accept any failures, and then you add a report address. So the mail server will send you a report saying, "Hey, I received a mail that didn't pass the rules, but I didn't do anything about it." This is really great because even though you think you know what mails you send, you usually always end up having a marketing department or whatever that sends mail and you have no clue about them. And that is so common. So if you want to do this, set it up with pnone, set up a RUA to some email address, and then monitor it for a few months, because you will get failures. You definitely do. But then when you have added, when you're ready to change to reject, you will still get the reports, and then you can track, for example, spoofing or spam mails where they fake your domain, and that's pretty common that they do that for big domains. Okay, this one failed. I wanted to, yeah.
So there is two questions. I will read them. Do you use MX if you want to include domain, and IP4 if you want to include the IP? That's number one question. And second question will be, what what if I understand this right? When you said DKIM, DMARC, SPF, it just include this in the header when I use send email using the prepared domain, and under comment I mean in the DNS config when I set up a domain. And he says there is one thing as a comment. I have like the P into quarantine.
So let's start with that. So you can have quarantine, which means that the mail will usually end up in spam. That's possibly a good start, but you don't want to keep doing that, because if it ends up in spam, then it's useless anyway. For the first one, what was that again? Yeah, I won't remember that. Okay, so for the MX one in SPF and IPv4, so it could be a good idea to include MX. That is the MX record for the domain you're sending from. Usually the MX server might send bounces, so it's a good idea to include it. For A, that is just the website's IP number. So you would, depends on how you send it, but if you have a single server that does everything, then you can include A, and it's probably a good idea to include MX too. So both of them, if you do it manually. For DKIM, yeah, it's up to the mail server to add the content to the mail, and it's opt-in, so you can't actually tell it to. You can't enforce that it needs to be there. I think that might. Yeah, so when you set it up in the DNS config, you usually just include yes, and let someone else figure out the list of IP numbers and all the domain keys and all that things. Yeah, probably. Okay, so let's talk about this. BIMI. It's icons in your inbox. I know that Boozt used this. There's this small icon here, so you can identify an email. It looks slightly better on a phone. Whoops. Yes. So it's like, yeah. So it's like favicons. It can be really, really expensive. The standard, we can jump through this. So the standard was made to encourage companies to use DMARC and some really strict rules. You need to have SPF pass, you need to have DKIM pass, and you need to add an extra record where you specify where it should load images from. The problem here is that Google, for example, they don't trust your favicon, or in this case BIMI, so they want you to sign it cryptographically, and they want you to verify that you own the trademark, even though you can have logos that look identical. They need to verify it. So the first one is just L. This is to load an image from this site, and all is fine. The problem is that no one actually uses that. The other one is load this PEM certificate. This is a PEM file. It's signed, and this actually contains the SVG image. So the image is actually in this PEM file. It is really, really horrible. And this is expensive. I think you need to pay $1,500 around there to get this PEM file, and this is per year. Yeah, it's DigiCert, and it's one more. So it's really, really insanely expensive. So I don't know. I understand why people want to use it, because it's branding, but it's just insanely expensive. And you need to add proof. So this will be like, what is it called? Yeah, so they will actually verify. They will contact you, and they will ask for proof that you own the trademark and all the things, and that will just fail on most companies. Yeah, Yeah, exactly. It is like extended validation, but you also need to send proof that you own the trademark. So it's even worse than extended validation. So this is probably no fun to do, and but I understand that people do it.
Every year.
Yes.
So you can't extend. You have to go the whole procedure again and again every year. So for the people that are online, you have to do this again and again every year. So it's not that it's gonna be one time and you extend it. It's every year the same procedure, the same pain to sign and upload. And you can't use the old certificate. So you have to re-sign it, re-upload it to public. So then the mails will be verified. Yeah. Otherwise you don't have favicon icon. It's no icon there.
Correctly, and as I said, you need to pass SPF and DMARC and DKIM. DMARC, normal DMARC only requires you to pass one of them, so you need to have either valid SPF or valid DKIM. But for the BIMI stuff, you actually need to have both valid. So that is fun. I will now actually show you a fun example about alignments. So now we come to this Foo Café page here. So so we have this Foo Café page. This one sent me an email. That's all fine. Let's see if we can load the source code, or if it decided to be super slow. Yeah, there I got it. Okay. So if we look at in this header here, it says SPF pass. That's fine. I mean, that's good. DKIM pass. That is also good. But it passed with this domain. But we can see here that the from header is actually something different. So here we have an alignment issue on the SPF. If you were to add DMARC to this domain, which you should, then it will fail, because this one and this IP doesn't match the sender domain at all. So if we look into the mail, we can see that, let's see if we can go down to DKIM. For the DKIM signature, we can see that it uses this domain, which again is not anything close to foocafe.org. And for SPF, it's also using, let's see if we can find return path. It's using this domain for SPF. So if you were to add the DMARC, this will fail. And you would, if you don't know about alignment, then it doesn't make sense, because if you look in this one, it says everything passed, but it did not. It passed for the envelope from, and it passed from whatever string they added to the mail, but it did not match the from address. So in order to fix this, Foo Café, they need to talk to this sender. I don't know who this is, MSSV, whatever. Yeah, right, MailChimp. So they need to contact them. They need to configure something they probably call a bounce email. That means that they you configure an email that they will use as a return path or envelope from. It's that we had some way here. Return. Then they will configure to use whatever the domain you specify here. That will usually be a CNAME to them, because they want to be able to receive bounces. Because if you send a lot of spams that don't get delivered, they want to know it. So they will force you to add a CNAME to some address they control, and then they will send from that. The other option is to ask them to sign the mails with a domain that's under foocafe.org. Then they will add a D equals foocafe.org and then some subdomain. And then Foo Café needs to publish a public key or add a CNAME that MailChimp tells them to do. This is usually what you need to do. But if you were to change let's say that they just changed to send from Foo Café directly, then you will hit the SPF rules for Foo Café. And if we just look at them, let's see if I can find, no, probably not. Yeah, there it is. if I can spell. Whatever. Right. Then we can see that they have included some. They have included Google. That's great. And the manual app. But none of them seems to match MailChimp, as far as I can see. So if they were to start sending from Foo Café directly, they would need to add one extra include that matches MailChimp. So they need to contact them for each and every of these. But in this case, we can see that they usually send from Google, and they usually send from manual app. So this is what you as a normal user would have to do in most cases. One thing I can add is that the SPF standard, it says that you're only allowed to have 10 DNS lookups. So if you have one include, that might do another include, and another include that does more, or you have A or MX or whatever, all those counts. And when you pass 10, it will handle it as failure, according to RFC. In reality, that number is higher, but you should still keep your includes lower than that, because otherwise you break the rules and you might get blocked. So that's fun with mail. Yeah, and none of this requires that the domain is signed in any way. So you just trust DNS for everything, and that's might be an issue if you ask some, but it's still better than what we have today.
There is no question online, but I have question.
Yeah.
So if you compare all three, including BIMI, it's going to be 4 verification. Which
Yes.
of these 4 is going to be the priorities? Like which one you should fix to be sure, okay, this one is making my email safe?
So all of them, but usually DKIM might be easiest. It depends, but DKIM might be easiest.
Well, this is not about the easiest. I want to see, like, if you have like priority list to say, okay, this is priority number 1, 2, 3. Like, I think BIMI is the last one. So you
Yeah, so
don't necessarily
BIMI,
need it.
if at all, is definitely the last one. DKIM, add that if you can. Most of the senders, they can support it. If you use Microsoft, or you use Google, or if you use some MailChimp or whatever, all of them support DKIM. And that is the absolute simplest thing to get working. SPF is messy because you need to find all the includes. You need to keep under 10 lookups, and servers might change IP whenever. So let's say that someone sends from Amazon, then they might change IPs all the time. So start with DKIM, start with DMARC, set policy none, set and add a RUA summary report email, and look at them. It is slightly hard to read those reports. It's a zip file with XML, and it's super confusing, but there are great tools out there. For example, the Har-yan, or there's probably more, that can give you graphical representations of the reports. So look into them. It's super expensive probably, but
We have online question, but could you please read it out loud and then answer the last one?
right. So I had my server hacked many years ago. They hacked WordPress and I started mass spam from my server. My server got blacklisted, so I had to request removal from all this. Even if after cleaning my server from the list, I had issues sending mail. Right. Mail, before all this stuff existed, or still do, mail rely heavily on something they called reputation or reputation lists. They have lists of IP numbers that they think are safe. This is a nasty hack, and it's really horrible. So if you ever end up on a list or get worst score on reputation list, you will have a hard time sending mails. And if you're using some VPS provider, for example, Hetzner or DigitalOcean, those servers are usually rated. They have pretty bad scores, so the mails will end up in spam. It might help to add DKIM and SPF. That might help you deliver the mails, but it's hard. And yeah, the way mail handles reputation list is just hard to pass. So I can tell you from web hosting perspective where I work, when we add new IPs we want to send mails from, we start by running the server for a few months, sending only what we think is good mails before we actually use in production, because otherwise it will be blocked directly. So we have some warm up, and that takes a long time before everyone trusts it completely. This is the world of mail. I don't know why it's that bad, and I would really like to change it, but that's the current state of mail. And yeah, if you end up on those lists, spam lists and so on, or get bad reputation, then yeah, it's hard to get back if you can at all. We have also, from web hosting again, we have had IP ranges doing web hosting, like HTTP web hosting, and then we switched to use them as email sending IP numbers, but they were just blocked everywhere because they base the reputation on whatever the site actually hosts. So it's not only mail, it's actually mail or web content. So it's even worse. Yeah.
How do the different mail providers differ? Because there are people online. At least one person online. So
Hello, person online. I have one question. How do the different mail providers differ in how they handle mail reputation? Like
Yeah.
Gmail, Hotmail,
it's up to everyone. We buy services out there. There's multiple. There's like DNSBL listed, like DNS blacklist from Spamhaus, for example. There are Siren, for example. They do some rules, and Google, they are so big so that they can look at a lot of content at the same time, and they have their own rules. And Microsoft, they definitely have their own rules, and they can just block you whenever, and they do. It's up to everyone. There's no golden rules. And then there's like spam or anti-spam providers that force you to pay to get off the list, and yeah, the whole mail environment is actually pretty bad. I think from that perspective, it's hard to get off the lists. But the best thing you can do is to add a rough in the DMARC, and then look if you have a lot of faked mails coming from you, or if you send mails that you don't expect. So look at that definitely. Rough, RUF, or RUA. So rough is full report. Not everyone uses that. I didn't mention it, and there might be some problems with GDPR using that. Otherwise, use RUA, which is the summary.
So are there any effort to try to fix this, or everyone just accepts that it's horrible?
This is the fixes. So mail is usually solved by adding more stuff to TXT records in DNS. And that's life now. There's actually even more things. For example, we have Dane, where you can publish the public key in DNS, and by using DNSSEC you can verify the certificate for the mail server, because mail don't believe in SNI and stuff, so you can't really validate the certificate unless you use this. And then there's a standard that says if you publish this Dane record, then the sending mail server should always use encrypted connections, because usually with mails you have there's a lot of downgrade attacks because you use star TLS, and it's pretty bad. Where the mail server say, "Hey, I can talk encrypted connection," and then after you receive that, you connect or you speak to it using TLS. But if you could man in the middle of that, then you just remove the capability, and then you continue using plain text, and that is mail currently. It's not super secure. You can't trust the senders. You can't trust anything. DMARC, SPF, DKIM makes it better, slightly.
So for online people, we give you chance for 1 minute more, so to ask your questions. We have last question from here. If anyone has a question, go for it.
Are there any online validators to validate any of these?
Yes, there's multiples. The Martian they have. Just so for DKIM, that is harder to validate because you need to send a mail to someone. That exists, but that requires you to be able to send a mail to a specific address, and then they verify that, and you get a report back. SPF, that is easy. There are tools out there that verify it, but then again, you need to know which IP you actually connect from, which service you use. So you can validate that the content is correct, and you can expand everything, but it's hard to validate that it actually works. And DMARC, that is so simple, so it's just string validation, and that exists. And there's tools where you can check how many includes you do, like MX Toolbox got one, and the Martian got one, and there's a few others. But other than that, use the reporting and see if you messed up. Yeah.
So there is no question from online, but there is a remark there. Is there one more? Okay, let's go for one more. You are the last one, okay? Okay, let's do it.
I'm pretty much a newbie
Yeah.
to these things. Forced here because no one else at my small company wants to deal with it. We send newsletters using services out there like YMLP and our CRM system is called Upsales. So we're going to have some issues, or we are having some issues. We've tried to configure it rightly. My question is, if a receiver of a proper newsletter thinks, well, I think this is spam, I don't know what, just as a lazy effort, just marks our emails as spam, how will that affect our reputation and
That
verifications?
Yes, that depends. There are some providers out there, for example, Simply, which is a competing company to one.com. They are hosting Surftown and so on. They are handling it really badly. They will trust it being spam. But for example, Gmail and so on, they will use a lot of like data, and they will look at everything. They will not just accept it being spam. So most big providers, they want to care. They might rate it, or they might add some information in their big data of things, but it shouldn't matter that much for single mails at least. But if you send out 10,000 mails and everyone marks it as spam, then it would probably be worse. So, but yeah, some handle it badly, most don't.
I think that's it. So let's do like the pizza part, and then you can ask Simon on spot if you have any more question, because everyone is waiting for pizza, but pizza doesn't wait. So thanks everyone participating online, and thanks Simon for presentation. See you next time.